Okay.
You are now live with Senate Appropriations, and I'm going to reach out to Jen.
Okay, this continuation of yesterday's discussion, and that has to do with the bill that we passed out Friday. We talked about yesterday an amendment that would release 10 million of the new rental assistance money that's coming down in the federal bill that we were just talking about. And then I heard from Senator Sirotkin, based on discussion, another program that provides vital support to Vermont families is the subsidies for internet service, which supports education and telemedicine and so forth. And so the request was to continue the funding for the next 2 months so that people can keep their internet service and connection. And the cost of that service is rounded off is about $130 per month. And the thought was 2 months would be a good bridge to make sure that the service remained and the benefit continued to flow. So what we have is for the committee to look at today is an amendment that would provide the additional, would provide the authority to spend up to 10 million of the rental assistance, new rental assistance money, consistent with the parameters, because this new money comes with income tests, as we talked about, and the old CRF money did not. And then the other would be to authorize the 200, and I think we rounded it up to 270 maybe, or Stephanie can give us the final figure.
What's drafted in right now is 275. It looks like the run rate's right around 260.
Yeah,
for a little bit of give, it's 275.
So it was probably better to, Senator Sirotkin had originally thought 250, but that wasn't covering the experience. So I said we at least should do 260, and Stephanie says give us some cushion and make it 275. So those are the, and then the Agency of Human Services indicated that they would like to make a date change from December 1st to November 1st. So those are the three items that we want to put into the amendment that we knew we were going to do an amendment on the rental assistance to keep assistance flowing. But then the date change is more technical, and the other is continuation of that assistance to help with internet service. So this has led to a great discussion in terms of what is the right language and approach, because in addition to the sunset problem that we dealt with on the accelerated connectivity program, there was language that said basically any unexpected, unexpended money, unobligated money would revert back to the CRF fund immediately by, I think, December 30th. So we're dealing with what is the best way to write the language relative to that fund reversion. And because there's about 3.6, is it, or 3.8 that is unexpended from those programs. And so Stephanie and Steve have been exchanging different views about how it should be written. And I don't know, I don't really care. I just want to put the money out there, I guess. And I want to do it in the way that is the easiest and the simplest, recognizing that, I don't know, and if we want to reclaim all that money, then we actually are having to amend that language that we included in 966 that said would be reverted back. And so I'm sure I've lost all the committee members on this, but the question really becomes one, how do we write the money for the 275? Yes, Senator Westman.
I just want to make sure when we did the housing money, we said both sewer and electricity. Is that in or out?
It only speaks to rental right now. It does not deal with the utility side.
So
You will still have to figure that out because you'll have to
here-
design a new program around that.
Here's my problem. Both of those two programs are out of money. And both helping people with electricity and helping with sewer and water. And what I would say is I'm happy to help with the internet, but if you can't pay your electric bill, what good does it do?
You know,
Unless we've extended the time that the power companies can't shut
they
somebody
can't
off.
disconnect. They cannot
Good.
disconnect. And so I recognize that we do have the utility issue. That's a permissible expenditure on the new money, as is the water and the sewer. But those are subject to protections around disconnect, and we can talk through and let the committees of jurisdiction.
I'm fine with that, but it just seems funny to me to do internet when you can't.
But internet's not regulated, so I do
Right, I
believe
got it.
that they could disconnect those services in a way that they can't for the regulated utilities.
I got it.
So yes, Bobby.
Yeah, and I just want to say that the rental properties that I own, I pay the water and the sewer, not the tenant, and it's all figured into their rent. So I don't know why we would want to do water and sewer anyways, because that's part of what the landlord provides to the tenant.
It depends. It depends on the what the landlord
Right.
how they set it up. For example, on the electrical utilities, many landlords do not pay that. The
Right,
water sewer oftentimes is paid by the landlord, but sometimes it's not. So this is to try to deal with a continuation of services that aren't subject to the protection of the disconnect moratorium. And if others get identified, this is the only one that has been identified based on the a time immediate, time sensitive, recognizing that the committees of jurisdiction are going to want to figure out how they want to address the 175 remaining in rental assistance. So what this would do is deal with the internet subsidies to families. And my understanding is about 3,000 households benefit from that subsidy. So it's not insignificant. And obviously it's important for education because a lot of kids are working, studying remotely or telemedicine. So Steve and
Jen?
Stephanie, have you worked out a
So Jen is
recommendation
also
to
with
us?
us. So Jen is with us and has drafted two options, and maybe Chrissy could share the screen and Jen could put the two draft options up. The $10 million of rental assistance, there's no utilities in that, and that will come when we get actually more federal direction on how the utilities will work under that. But the options around the language that's already in S36, which allowed public service to pay the contracted obligations through December 30th, and the timing now around this extension of the internet. And Jen, was your preference to walk through the language, and as questions come up, we can.
Is this a policy question or a fiscal question?
It's sort of a mechanical question about a fiscal issue.
Okay. And so my question is, are we the best people to know which mechanical option works best for the state financial system?
It's not even about the state financial system.
Yeah.
It is the fact that you have a balance in an appropriation that you've made of CRF funds that the underlying language would revert. But there seems to be an option if you want to keep the money in the broadband arena and wait for further legislative action to have that go out, or do you want to actually revert the dollars is the sort of the crux of the decision.
So basically, what we should do, why can't we just amend the language in 966 and delete that section about immediate reversion?
That's what it's proposed to do. That's one of the two options.
That's one of the options.
That's what this does. It does it in two different ways,
Okay.
depending on your goal.
And
Well, my goal is to get 275,000 appropriated. Senator Starr.
yeah, what about earlier this afternoon, somebody talked about, I think it was Tom, that talked about sending out, the feds were sending out money to help with internet services in rural areas. Did I misunderstand that conversation or?
No, that was me. And there is other money coming in, like there's other money coming for internet assistance and 300,000, but this is a specific issue that we're trying to deal with right away and just a specific need of a program. I think that so
This
that's
is just
that's
2 months until we can figure out how that other money is
Gonna
gonna,
work. Yep,
yeah.
very good. Thank you.
So,
So-
our two options are to go back, just like we did with the sunset, go back and just keep the remaining allocation in place and not have it revert and appropriate 275 of it.
right.
But you
That's one.
would actually, if you actually reverted it, you then you then would appropriate it. If you keep it, then you would allocate it.
Okay.
Sounds
So
like a plan.
why don't we have just Jen walk quickly through the two options and then you can see, it might become clear when you see the language.
Okay, so the first option here would strike out section 4 of your S36 amendment, and instead, which is the one that was originally appropriating that 275,000, we'll do that in this, but it goes back into Act 137, which is the act number for what was H 966. And it goes right into that program language and it gets rid of that automatic reversion on December 20th. And then it says, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the Commissioner of Public Service is authorized to continue dispersing funds under the program. This is what was in section 4 for any broadband project contracted for prior to December 20th and completed and not completed on or before December 30th. And then it would say the commissioner shall retain any remaining balance of funds appropriated under this section. This is the big broadband section, and shall not disperse them for any other purpose without specific authorization from the General Assembly. And then we would add in a section 4A that authorizes that specific 275.
Okay.
So, all right,
So
so that
that deals-
authorizes the use of that.
Okay.
So that's the one that would leave the money with the Department of Public Service, but kind of freeze it until the legislature directs them how to spend it, except for those two purposes, for projects that had already been entered into before December 20th and for this 275 for 2 months.
All
Okay,
right.
that's option 1. Option 2 is again to go in, to strike out section 4 from the underlying bill, go into that Act 137 language, again, get rid of that automatic reversion on December 20th. And again, allow the Commissioner of Public Service to continue dispersing funds for projects entered into before December 20th. But then it says any unexpended funds under the program after payment of all eligible expenses for broadband projects that were contracted for prior to December 20th, 2020 shall revert to the state's coronavirus relief fund. So it just takes all the money that isn't needed for that purpose. And then the third instance of amendment in this scenario under option 2 would then again have that same intent language. And Chrissy, if you'd scroll down a little more, then it would say it would appropriate the sum of 275,000 from the coronavirus relief fund that we just put money back into to the Department of Public Service for that 2-month extension.
Yeah. So the second one really reverts all the money to the CRF fund, and there is no longer that 3.5 give or take money that's in broadband held for appropriation or held for allocation.
So it's about the nature of the unexpended balance. Do you want to keep it locked up in the public service arena, or do you want it to fold back into the pot of CRF?
Kind of like
And
one.
I know that the Joint Information Technology Committee would like it to stay
Right.
in, available for this purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
The only thing that I want to be absolutely clear on is that in no way are we circumventing or somehow giving public service department the authority to spend anything other than what they authorized in contracts before December 20th and the 275,000.
Yeah, that's option one. I think that's what that option one does.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question is, now we know that we've got more money coming in. We also know that we can, in fact, take some of this CRF money that comes with all these constraints, and we can do a general fund conversion. Are we, in some ways, some of what we did for broadband and what we have was driven by the constraints of the federal CRF dollars. And this just continues those constraints in place. So if we wanted to say, gee, that 3.8 million could be better spent under these parameters, if we did that general fund conversion, are we, will that option still be available to us? So it would still be done to support broadband, but it would be done in a way that doesn't, it gets us out of the constraints that that the COVID relief, the CRF money imposed. That's
So
my
that's a really interesting point. I think what you're saying, and this is something maybe for Jen, let's say we did the option one, which says the money stays locked up in the public service department. But then let's say in a month, in the next bill we put out, which is the budget adjustment, we take that money and use it for just, and this is hypothetically, to give it to corrections, turn it into general fund, and then take that same amount of money and give it back to public service department to use for broadband. And so it would be like further amending it and changing it in a way that and the only question I'd ask Jen is, if we do this, can we come back and do that second tier so we really free it up from all limits?
Well, since it's reserved,
Yeah, I can't think of a reason you couldn't come back in, and maybe you'd be amending it to sort of hold it, to tell them to hold it and not use it for anything else. They'd retain it. And then you would go back in and say, actually, you won't retain it. You'll give it back and we'll give you this other money instead, or however you want to handle it.
I just
think
wanted to
as long
make
as
sure.
it's not obligated in some way, I don't think it's off limits to you.
Okay, so committee, you understand what I'm trying to think about is keeping all our options open. Now that we know that we have more flexibility to, with that CRF money for other purposes to that would free up general fund, that gets us out of the kind of the straitjacket that some people, particularly on the technology side, have felt got imposed by those federal guidelines. So the cleanest way and the clearest way, I think, is option one.
Yep. I think so too.
We need to make it very clear that the only thing that we are expending is that additional 275, and the rest is being unreverted. We're reverting our reversion here and keeping that money in the broadband sphere pending further discussion and assignment or how a utilization so that the committees, policy committees can take a look at that. Okay. All right.
so in the slate of amendments, we'll go with option one.
Yes, I think that's, and this.
Do you need a motion on that, Jane, or can we just do
Well,
it?
actually, the amendment is going to come out, it is coming out individually. It's not a committee amendment.
Okay.
We can't do a committee. The bill was a committee bill, but the amendment has to be individual senators. So the way it's written up right now is all members of the Senate Appropriations Committee, plus the chair of Economic Development, because of the housing piece, the 10 million, moving that out, and anything related to that broadband money, Senator Cummings. So it would be all of the Appropriation Committee members and the two other chairs of those committees would be sponsors of this combined amendment.
Would the committee like to look at the $10 million amendment? I don't think the words have been sort of flat. People have not seen the.
I think we should.
Yeah.
And they have been shared with Senator Sirotkin, who's obviously supporting. And originally, Richard Williams had wanted 50 million suggested out of the 200. Our view was that was too much. Senator Sirotkin felt that that was rather a high amount to move out in this, using this vehicle. The 10 million seems to be more than sufficient to help keep the benefits flowing. And I think, Rich, you said in terms of the rental assistance that's been going out, the landlords were generally had 4 or less units.
Well, what they reported to us is that the average landlord that answered their survey, which was like 640 landlords, their number of units was between 1 and 4.
The majority were between 1 and
Yep.
4, more than
Yep.
half.
More, yep.
So yes, if we can take a look at the language and make sure that it's okay with the committee.
Yeah, if we go back to the document and go to the very top where it's the first proposal of amendment, Chrissy, we're just going to put the same document back up and make it just a little bit bigger.
3A.
3A, we're adding a new 3A that states that of the 200 million that's available under the new bill, $10 million is appropriated to housing and community development to provide rental assistance consistent with the constraints of the federal act.
Yeah.
And that's just a starting point for, obviously new programming has to be developed around once there's clarity on what can happen under the provisions of this $200 million.
So it allows, and the main thing on the rental assistance is it does set an income test.
Yes.
But that's why the language is consistent with the requirements of the act, which sets the limit at 80% of median household income. So people are right with getting that money flowing so that it can pick up, because what we did was appropriate the money for the applications. And there were about 1,500 of those applications in December that are eligible. It's just the money, that's the 2.8 million that we appropriated of CRF money in the original bill.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And the only other thing was just the date change. So those are the 3 changes.
move the 3 amendments as,
I don't know if we have to vote because it's not a
because we all
committee.
sponsored it.
Yeah. So I guess you need to let me know if you don't want to be a sponsor.
And just to be clear, it'll end up looking like 4 amendments because of what we just did. We ended up amending our underlying section 4 and adding a 4A. So just in numerical order, it'll look like 4 amendments.
But it's all in one.
Yeah. But three separate pieces, themes. Yeah.
Okay. That's why we wanted to get this resolved today. The bill's coming up tomorrow. And I don't think, Becca, we were going to just keep it, and should we offer these amendments tomorrow? Seems like we should. And then third reading should move pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, I think we have wrapped it up for today. We can go and, well, I hope everybody had a chance to see the swearing in, but we're done.